There are children. And then there are things that were the shape of children. Those were the last words written in the journal of Dr. Samuel Harding before he vanished from Sidelia, Missouri in 1871. The pages were found decades later, scorched. Around the edges, hidden behind a false wall in the ruins of his former office, what they describe isn't just chilling something older than science, older than religion, something that looks back when you stare into its eyes. And in 1867, it had a name, Timothy Caldwell. This isn't a ghost story, it's worse, because ghosts obey rules. This didn't. Timothy was 8 years old when he came to live on the Caldwell farm, a patch of land already cursed by the Civil War and broken dreams. His parents were dead. His arrival should have meant relief for his uncle free labor, and extra set of hands. Instead, it marked the start of a pattern. Quiet at first, a chicken here, calf there, accidents, losses, nothing you could prove, nothing you could stop. But the eyes. Everyone mentions the eyes, pale blue. Too pale. Like glass marbles that saw too much. The kind of gaze that made adults shift in their seats and forget what they were saying. It was always polite, always calm, always watching. Then the children began to die, one by one, drowned in inches of water. Broken at the base of cliffs they knew like the backs of their hands, found in places no child should have wandered. And Timothy was always there, the one who found the body. The one who described the scene too well, too precisely, like he'd been waiting for it. The town doctor, educated, rational, hardened by war, started keeping notes. Not because he believed in evil, but because something inside him was starting to. What he recorded was only shared once, and only with a trusted friend. Before he disappeared, they sealed the records, buried the truth, labeled Timothy Caldwell as unexplainable. But that was never the truth. The truth is more dangerous. You were never supposed to hear this. But now that you have, you can't look away. And by the time we're done, you'll understand why. The Caldwell farm sat 15 miles south of Sidelia. It's tucked between two ridge lines that blocked out more than just the wind. It was the kind of land where shadows arrived before sunset and stayed long after dawn. After the war, most men in the region were broken, either in body or spirit. Thomas Caldwell was both. His brother William died in Andersonville. His widow followed 2 winters later from fever. Their son Timothy was delivered to Thomas like a parcel from the dead. The boy said little of the past. He arrived with a threadbare satchel, a Bible without a cover, and a small iron key that he kept wrapped in cloth. Sarah Caldwell, Thomas's wife, tried to mother him for 3 days. On the 4th, she stopped speaking his name. He's not right, she whispered to a neighbor at church. He doesn't sleep, just watches. The farm animals noticed at first. Livestock refused to come near him. Chickens flapped and screamed if he stepped into the coop. The family dog, a half-blind shepherd mutt named Cutter, growled low every time the boy passed. Then one morning, Cutter was gone, just gone. No blood, no trail, just a length of chewed rope hanging from the porch rail. Timothy never asked where the dog had gone. Worked like a man 3 times his age. Sunrise to sunset, no breaks, no complaints. He never played, never sang, never got sick. He would stand barefoot in the cold mud for hours, eyes fixed on the horizon like he was waiting for something none of us could see. Then came the first accident. Mary Fletcher, 5 years old, drowned in a creek so shallow you couldn't submerge your knees. Timothy found her, he said, told her mother with a face full of concern. Described the position of the body like a surgeon, not a child. Said he'd been looking for a lost calf. But there was no mud on his boots, no evidence he'd been searching. At her funeral, every mourner wept, except one. Timothy bowed his head, his lips whispered prayers, but his eyes scanned the crowd, unblinking, unfeeling, like he was studying grief, or feeding off it. Dr. Harding made a note that day in his journal. The boy exhibits no appropriate affect, sociopathy perhaps, or something more obscure, something older. But the next death, What happened on Devil's Bluff would break. The town's ability to pretend Devil's Bluff wasn't named by accident. Locals avoided it, not because of folklore, but because something about the rock felt wrong. No birds nested there. No deer grazed nearby. The cliff face was cracked like an old skull, and at its base, a silence hung heavier than gravity. Henrik, Len should have known better. The old Norwegian had worked timber all his life. Even with arthritis in his knees, he could still outclimb boys half his age. He checked his beehives on that bluff every week, knew every stone, every handhold. He didn't fall. Timothy said he saw his hat first snagged on a thorn bush. Then he looked down and saw the body, calm, measured. No panic in his voice when he told the others. "Mr. Len isn't moving," he said. "I think he fell, but there was no blood, just a twisted body surrounded by dead bees. Too many." Harding was summoned again. He examined the corpse, then walked the bluff. The hives were undisturbed. No sign of attack, no reason for a swarm, and yet the bees were clustered around Henrik's corpse like mourners, or witnesses. "Bees don't behave this way," Harding muttered. When asked, Timothy offered a theory. Maybe he made them angry. Maybe they chased him off the bluff. And he added, almost thoughtfully, "Bees will protect a queen at any cost." Strange. Phrase for a child to know. Stranger still was the tone he said it in. Like he wasn't guessing, he remembered. Sarah Caldwell began locking her bedroom door that week. Neighbors whispered, children refused to play outside. Something in the town's posture changed, subtle but real. Fear had no name yet, but it had a shape. Small, blonde, polite. Harding dug deeper. He cross-referenced letters from Andersonville. Timothy's father had died of starvation and exposure, but also under strange circumstances. According to prison records, he'd been found face down in a wash basin, eyes wide, tongue black. No wounds, no toxins. Confederate medic had written. 2 words in the margins. Not normal. Harding asked Timothy if he remembered his father. The boy paused and said, "He used to talk to things that weren't there. I think they followed him." Dr. Harding didn't sleep that night. He began to wonder if Timothy Caldwell wasn't just dangerous, but inherited. September 1866. 6-year-old Jacob Mills vanished into the woods near his family's cabin. It wasn't. Uncommon for children to wander, but not Jacob. He was obedient to a fault, afraid of the dark, terrified of being alone. By sundown, over 30 men were searching the forest. Dr. Harding was among them. So was Timothy Caldwell. And Timothy Agne was the one who found him. 4 days later, he appeared at the mills. Door before dawn, no adult with him. His face pale, clothes damp with morning dew. "I think I heard crying," he said, "from an old well, north side of the ridge." They followed him. The brush was thick, path hidden, but the well was real, half collapsed and overgrown. At the bottom, Jacob, barely alive. The boy died within hours. Too weak, too cold, too far gone. But what haunted Harding wasn't the death, it was the rescue. How had Timothy found that well? How had he heard a whisper from 50 feet down through rotted wood and bramble? And why was the debris around the rim arranged? Logs and brush had been laid in a way that looked natural, till you looked closer. It wasn't fallen, it was placed, deliberate, camouflaged. Not the work of a wandering child, but of someone hiding something. Harding said nothing to the others, but that night he returned alone. And what he found shook him. Animal bones, small ones, arranged in a ring near the base of a tree, charred but intact. No evidence of campfires or predators, just bones sacrificed or offered. He made a sketch in his journal and wrote, "If Timothy placed Jacob there, then the boy not only anticipated death, he controlled the conditions under which it arrived." When he returned to the farm for a routine visit days later, Timothy greeted him with a smile. "Did you sleep well last night, doctor?" It wasn't a question, it was a test, and Harding felt it. The boy sat through the examination of his aunt. Silent, and observant. When Harding packed his bag, Timothy leaned in and said, "I heard what you saw. The bones are for protection. Most people don't understand. Most people." That phrase echoed in Harding's head for weeks, because it wasn't. The language of a child. It was the language of something ancient, disguised in innocence, practicing death. By October, Sidelia was unraveling. Livestock deaths spiked. Crops withered early. Tools rusted overnight. Some blamed bad weather, others blamed bad luck. But Harding knew better. He had been keeping maps red ink, marking every incident. The pattern wasn't random. It radiated outward from one fixed point. The Caldwell farm. And at the center of that farm stood Timothy, 15 chickens dead in a week, each with its neck broken precisely at the spine. Not chewed, not torn, just severed. Harding examined them. Clean, he wrote in his journal. Surgical. The wounds matched the break patterns of cadavers he'd seen dissected in St. Louis, except these were done by hand. James Wickham, a neighboring farmer, lost 2 calves the same way. Harding asked if he'd seen anything unusual. Wickham just nodded slowly. "That Caldwell boy. I saw him by the fence line, waving like he always does. But his smile didn't touch his eyes. Gave me chills." The Pattersons began sleeping with a shotgun by the door. And still, no one acted. Why? Because Timothy was a child, and adults are trained conditioned to protect children, to dismiss unease, to explain the unnatural through the familiar. But Dr. Harding had stopped explaining, started cataloging, cross-referencing the timing of deaths with Timothy's movements, interviewing neighbors under the guise of medical visits. What he uncovered painted a single truth. Wherever Timothy went, decay followed. Then came the incident at church. A visiting preacher, fiery, loud, full of Old Testament warnings, called the children to the altar for a special blessing. Timothy hesitated. His aunt nudged him forward. He walked slowly, head bowed, hands folded. Was the preacher laid hands on the children? He paused in front of Timothy. His fingers trembled. His breath caught in his throat. Then, without warning, he collapsed. Seizure, convulsions, foaming at the mouth. He died before they could get him to the wagon. Later, Harding reviewed eyewitness accounts. Only one thing matched across them all. The moment the preacher touched Timothy, the boy opened his eyes and smiled. Not the polite smile, not the practiced mask. This one was real. And it chilled everyone who saw it. At this point, if you're still watching, you're not the same person who clicked play. You've been pulled in. I'll write this in the comments twice to mark the shift. He wore the face of a child. He wore the face of a child. Those 6 words. Separate the ones who understand from the ones still sleeping. After the preacher's death, Sidelia shifted. Quietly, subtly. But undeniably, children stopped playing outside. Mothers crossed the street to avoid the Caldwell boy, and Timothy didn't seem to mind. In fact, he appeared to thrive. Dr. Harding began having dreams, not the surreal kind. These were structured, deliberate, always the same. A corridor of black stone, flickering candlelight, and a voice behind. Him soft, ageless, whispering his name in a tone that was neither threat nor comfort, but invitation. He awoke each time with blood on his pillow and his name carved into the fog on his window. Harding, 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 he told no one. The town's school teacher, Ms. Lillian Abbott, lasted until mid-November. Then she left without warning, boarding a train east and never returning. Weeks later, a letter arrived addressed to Harding. There is something unnatural in his eyes. I don't mean evil. I mean pre-human. That boy doesn't blink.
Ow!
He doesn't laugh. And he remembers everything I've ever said verbatim. When I asked him to recite a psalm, he quoted back my grandmother's final words instead. Things I never told anyone. I don't know how I know this, but I'm certain. He's not alone in there. There's something behind him, watching, waiting. Harding burned the letter, but he couldn't burn the truth. Began researching old cases, unexplained child phenomena, historical accounts of blessed or cursed youths. One name came up again and again in 17th century texts. Buried beneath church trials and forbidden scrolls, Timothy Caldwell. A corruption of a name? A cipher? Some translations called him a seer, others the echo. 1621, a boy matching Timothy's description was burned at the stake. The next day, the judge who ordered the execution was found in his chambers, eyes gouged out, mouth filled with salt. Harding realized this wasn't new. This had happened before, and every time it wore the same mask. A boy, silent, observant, to still, and always with a name close enough to be dismissed by the ignorant, but recognizable to the initiated. Timothy Caldwell, Timothy Caldwell, the echo. A mirror sent forward. To test what we'll tolerate. To measure how much darkness can hide. Inside, something we're programmed to trust. To stare back at mankind and ask, will you still protect it, even when it begins to unmake you? December 12th, 1867. The temperature plummeted. Not the usual Missouri frost, this was something else. Ice crept up the windows from the inside. Wells froze solid overnight. Birds fell from the sky mid-flight, their wings locking mid-beat, like the air itself had decided to end them. Through it all, Timothy Caldwell never wore a coat. He walked barefoot to the general store that morning, left no prints in the snow, no steam from his breath. The clerk, Henry Groves, said Timothy stared at him for 6 uninterrupted minutes, then asked for a jar of lye. When Henry asked why, Timothy just smiled and said, "It's for the flies that aren't supposed to be here." Harding got to the store. Within the hour, the boy was already gone. But behind the counter, Henry had collapsed, his hands blistered, his eyes bleeding from the corners. He survived, but barely. His first words when he regained consciousness were, "He showed me what's beneath us." Harding tried to question him further, but Henry began speaking in Latin, perfectly fluent, with syntax that predated even classical Roman grammar. It wasn't possession, it was recitation. Like a memory had been inserted. That night, Sidelia burned down its own church. The townsfolk gathered silently. No mob, no shouting, just stillness. They poured oil across the steps, onto the altar, up the walls. Matches struck in ritual rhythm. No one could say why, but everyone agreed afterward. It felt like a baptism in reverse, a necessary unholiness to prevent something worse from taking root. And yet, the next morning, every family in Sidelia found the exact same thing nailed to their front doors. A drawing of a child, charcoal on thick paper, identical across 47 homes. The figure's face was scratched out violently. Below the drawing, one sentence. "You tried this before?" Harding didn't sleep for 3 days. Began hearing noises behind the walls of his office. Clicking sounds. Not rodents, or like joints resetting. Fingers stretching. He tore through his notes, chasing any logic he could hold. But logic had left Sidelia. This wasn't science. This was something older than science. A test. A warning. A recurrence. He wrote one final line in his journal that week. Not a conclusion, but a confession. Timothy Caldwell is not a boy. He is the echo of a mistake that mankind keeps making. By Christmas, Sidelia no longer spoke Timothy's name. People referred to him in euphemism, the boy on Cooper Hill, or that child. No one visited the Caldwell house, not even to deliver mail. It stood like a mausoleum, the windows dark at every hour except midnight, when a soft, pulsing orange glow could be seen in the attic. Like something was breathing fire behind the glass. Harding knew he was being watched. Each morning, he found pages torn from his journals, pages he had never shown to anyone, nailed to his door in mere script. His own handwriting reversed. One note simply read, "Stop asking questions you already know the answer to." He stayed inside, candlelight, locked windows, loaded revolver by the bed. It didn't matter. That Friday, Dr. Peter Wexler Harding's closest friend and the only other man in town who dared still speak rationally vanished. No trace, no note, no struggle. Only a gift left on Harding's porch, a doll carved from wax, its limbs twisted backwards, its mouth sewn shut with human hair. Inside its chest cavity, Wexler's wedding ring. Harding snapped. He took his notes, his pistol, and walked toward the Caldwell property. He didn't knock. He kicked the door open. The house was empty, dustless, quiet, clean in a way that suggested the absence of time, not effort. No cobwebs, no scent. Just rows and rows of books, not written in any language Harding recognized. The ink shimmered when he tried to read them, pages that turned themselves, titles that whispered. And then he heard it. From upstairs, a voice, childlike, but not Timothy's. It was many voices, layered, harmonizing in unnatural tones, calling. One word, repeat, repeat, repeat. Harding followed the sound up the stairs, each step heavier than the last. When he reached the attic, the door opened for him. Inside stood Timothy, but not as he remembered. He was taller, paler, his eyes now fully black, as if they'd turned inward. And behind him were mirrors, dozens, all reflecting different versions of Timothy. Some younger, some older, twisted beyond recognition. And in one mirror, Harding saw himself. Not as he was, but as a child. Standing beside Timothy, smiling. He stumbled backward, horrified. Timothy tilted his head and whispered, "You came back just like you promised." The mirrors pulsed. The room shook, and then darkness. Silence. When Harding awoke, it was morning. He was lying in the field behind the Caldwell house, his journal clutched to his chest, the pages soaked with blood that wasn't his. His revolver was gone, his boots gone, his mind fractured. He limped. Back to town? Sidelia had changed. Windows were boarded shut. Every cross had been taken down. Entire families had vanished. A strange humming now filled the air low, metallic, like a distant engine that never stopped. At the post office, he found a telegram addressed to him. No sender, no location. Just one sentence. He must finish this time. Harding returned to his study. He locked the door, lit every candle he could find, and began piecing together what the town had refused to acknowledge. The town had seen him before, in 1799, in 1721, in 1604. Different names, same face, same smile. A child appearing from nowhere, parents who adopted him, surge in unnatural weather, missing people, cryptic phrases carved into walls. Each time, the town tried to bury it, burn it, forget it. Each time, it came back stronger. It wasn't just Sidelia, other towns, other countries. Harding found a diary from a monastery in Galicia, dated 1196, that spoke of a mirror child, who emerged every third generation always. From the ground, always alone, always watching. Harding realized the truth. Timothy wasn't born. He was unsealed, a recurring wound in the world. A looped correction that erased memories, reset patterns, and inserted itself into the weak points of human history. The phrase, "You tried this," before wasn't metaphor. It was a warning. It was fact. And now Harding saw why he was the one receiving the visions. He had been there the first time. A witness. Perhaps an accomplice. The mirror had shown him a child version of himself because it was him. And like all sins buried deep enough, he'd returned to the scene of the crime. Sidelia wasn't a town. It was a stage, and the play had begun again. The final page of Harding's notebook was no longer blank. Someone or something had written on it, "You are not the observer. You are the unfinished. By January. Sidelia had no memory of the Caldwell family. Their house no longer stood on Cooper Hill, just a scorched patch of earth, as if something had burned from underneath, not above. Locals passed by without stopping, without asking. No one mentioned Timothy. No one mentioned Harding. Their names were gone. But you're still here, reading, listening, searching. That's what it wants. Harding's notes were never found, but fragments surfaced in basements and ash heaps in the margins of forgotten books. A few pages made it into private collections. Some appeared online for a moment before being scrubbed by forces no one could trace. But one phrase repeats, again and again, across centuries and languages, always handwritten, always the same. Script. The mirror does not show you what's there, shows you what you buried. Some say Harding still lives not as a man, but as a fragment, reflection trapped in a house that no longer exists. Others say he succeeded in sealing Timothy away. For now. That the boy sleeps somewhere beneath Missouri, waiting for the next crack in the veil, the next observer. And maybe that's the worst part, because some stories exist to entertain, some to warn. But this one found you. So if tonight you hear scratching behind your mirror, if your reflection seems just a second slow, if you wake up standing where you swore you were dreaming, don't run, don't scream, don't look away, because he remembers you. And this time, he won't let you forget. Symbolic phrase call to identity transformation. I do not fear the reflection. I am the one it fears. Repeat it. Own it. Make it your shield. Because the hidden forces count on your silence. But men who remember men who break the loop. And maybe that's why you're still watching. Welcome to the place they never wanted you to find.